Ford calculated a human life at $200,725 and decided a fix wasn't worth it. An internal Ford memo put a dollar value on burn deaths before a single car shipped. The fix cost $11 per car, 27 people died in fires, and Ford knew for years. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to 1968 and Lee Iacocca's mandate. Iacocca demanded the Pinto weigh under 2,000 pounds and cost under $2,000 to produce. The design timeline was compressed to just 25 months, roughly half the industry standard. That schedule meant the tooling was locked before crash safety testing was fully complete. By the time engineers flagged the fuel tank problem, the production line was already running. Now let us unpack the first damning specific: Ford's own cost-benefit analysis, document by document. The document is formally titled Fatalities Associated with Crash-Induced Fuel Leakage and Fires. The memo was authored by Ford engineer E.S. Grush and C.S. Sonby in 1973. It was submitted internally to oppose a proposed federal flammability safety standard. The memo assigned a monetary value of $200,725 to each human fatality in a fuel fire crash. That figure was not invented by Ford. It was drawn from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration tables. Ford's analysts then applied those NHTSA figures to their own vehicle fleet in a cost-benefit calculation. The memo estimated 180 burn deaths, 180 serious burn injuries, and 2,100 burned vehicles annually. Total societal cost of those deaths and injuries? Approximately $49.5 million per the memo's math. The cost of retrofitting all 12.5 million vehicles and light trucks? Approximately $137 million. The memo concluded the $137 million cost outweighed the $49.5 million benefit, so no fix.
The math was not illegal at the time. Cost-benefit analysis was standard regulatory practice. What made it damning was that Ford already knew the specific fix and its cost. That brings us to the second damning specific, the $11 fix that Ford chose not to install. The fix was a polyethylene shield fitted between the fuel tank and the differential bolts. Internal Ford crash test documents from as early as 1970 identified the tank's vulnerability. In low-speed rear-end impacts, the differential's protruding bolts punctured the fuel tank. Tests showed punctures occurred in crashes as slow as 20 to 25 miles per hour. Ford ran at least 40 crash tests between 1970 and 1976 per court-introduced evidence. According to court records, the tank failed the 20 miles per hour standard in the majority of those tests. Ford engineers knew the shield solution existed, but the $11 cost conflicted with Iacocca's budget. The $11 figure comes from Ford's own internal parts cost analyses introduced in court proceedings. The Pinto launched to the public in September 1970 with the vulnerable tank design intact. Ford sold approximately 3 million Pintos between 1971 and 1980 across the model's lifespan. Now the third damning specific. What happened on actual roads as a consequence of that decision? The Grimshaw versus Ford Motor Company case in 1977 became the first to expose the memo publicly. In that case, a 1972 Pinto was rear-ended and caught fire, leaving teenager Richard Grimshaw severely burned. The driver, Lily Gray, died from her injuries. Grimshaw survived but required dozens of surgeries. Grimshaw's legal team subpoenaed Ford's internal documents, unearthing the cost-benefit memo. In 1978, the Orange County jury awarded Grimshaw $2.5 million in compensatory damages.
The jury then added $125 million in punitive damages, one of the largest awards in U.S. history at that time. A California appellate court later reduced the punitive award to $3.5 million, citing proportionality. But the damage to Ford's public reputation was already done. The memo became national news. Mother Jones magazine published the memo in 1977, bringing it to the widest possible public audience. The story's author, Mark Dowie, named the document and the $11 figure in a detailed investigation. Now, the fourth damning specific: Ford's response to federal regulators during those same years. NHTSA began investigating the Pinto's fuel system in 1977, following a surge in fire-related complaints. Ford lobbied NHTSA actively for years against proposed rear-impact fuel integrity standards. Internal Ford strategy documents showed the company tracked and countered each proposed regulation. Ford argued that any new fuel standard would impose unacceptable costs across the auto industry. By 1978, NHTSA issued a formal defect determination for the Pinto's fuel system. That formal determination triggered a process that Ford could no longer lobby its way around. Now, the fifth damning specific: the criminal indictment that followed, unprecedented in U.S. history. In August 1978, 3 teenage sisters died when their Pinto was rear-ended on an Indiana highway. The victims were Judy, Lynn, and Donna Ulrich. Their deaths prompted an Elkhart County grand jury. In September 1978, the grand jury returned 3 counts of reckless homicide against Ford Motor Company. It was the first time a U.S. corporation had been charged with criminal homicide for a product defect. Ford assembled an estimated $1 million legal defense team, led by James Neal of Nashville, Tennessee.
The trial began in January 1980 in Winamac, Indiana, drawing national press attention. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 25 hours across 4 days. On March 13, 1980, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty on all 3 counts. The acquittal hinged partly on whether Ford's 1973 memo addressed the specific Ulrich vehicle. The jury was also not shown the full cost-benefit memo, which had been subject to admissibility disputes. But the criminal trial had already permanently changed how the American public understood corporate liability. Ford still faced the separate civil and regulatory track running simultaneously through those years. NHTSA's 1978 defect determination led directly to Ford's voluntary recall announcement. In June 1978, Ford announced a recall of 1.5 million Pinto and Mercury Bobcat vehicles. The recall required installation of a polyethylene shield, nearly identical to the $11 part engineers had proposed. Ford ultimately settled the majority of fire-related civil suits quietly and out of court. Exact total settlement figures remain confidential, but legal scholars estimate tens of millions of dollars. Now we turn to the final act: what changed, what didn't, and why this case still defines product liability law. The Pinto scandal directly accelerated NHTSA's development of Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 301. FMVSS 301 mandated specific fuel system integrity requirements for rear impact crashes in all passenger cars. The Grimshaw Punitive Award, even reduced, established that juries could punish corporate cost-benefit decisions. Legal scholars cite Grimshaw as the precedent that made it financially dangerous to document and ignore a known defect.
The Indiana criminal prosecution, despite its acquittal, created new legal theories for future corporate homicide cases. Prosecutors in states from Texas to New York studied the Elkhart County indictment strategy in subsequent decades. Ford discontinued the Pinto in 1980, the same year the criminal trial concluded. Ford issued no formal public admission of wrongdoing at any point during or after the recall. The actual death toll attributed to Pinto fuel fires remains contested in the historical and legal record. NHTSA's own 1978 analysis cited 27 fire-related deaths linked to the Pinto's rear fuel tank design. Some independent analysts, including researcher Gary Schwartz, put the true total considerably higher. Schwartz's 1991 Law Review article argued the Pinto's safety record was comparable to similar small cars of the era. That revisionist view remains a minority position. The documentary record of internal knowledge is not in dispute. What is documented is that Ford possessed crash test data, possessed a solution, and chose not to implement it. That pattern,
knowledge, solution, rejection, cover would recur in cases from tobacco to opioids to auto airbags. The Pinto case established that internal documents don't stay internal when litigation begins. Every subsequent auto industry safety scandal has cited Grimshaw as the template for what discovery can reveal. NHTSA received expanded recall authority in part because of the pressure generated by the Pinto investigations. The case remains a standard teaching example in business ethics, law, and public policy curricula worldwide. The lesson most cited is not that Ford was uniquely evil, but that its process was depressingly ordinary.
A schedule, a budget constraint, a memo, and a calculation. Ordinary corporate machinery producing catastrophic outcomes. And the receipts, the memos, the test logs, the jury awards are all in the public record. Ford paid $200,725 per life in its own arithmetic and $11 to fix the problem in the real world. The math was always simple. The choice to do it that way was the scandal. If this story made you look twice at a safety recall notice, that's exactly what documented history is for. Every case we cover at Pint-Sized Scandals is in the record. We just read it so you don't have to. Subscribe, and we will keep reading. Pint-Sized Scandals. The receipts are always in the record. We just find them for